And we're back with another quick Rimworld tutorial on a subject very near and dear to my heart, rest and rest effectiveness. Now the first thing to realise is all of these pawns here have a rest meter, and once this rest meter falls below 75%, you can send them to bed, though if it goes below 30% they start getting a bit cranky. Best to get them to bed before that. However, when it comes to this rest meter charging up, things get a little bit more confusing. So, the first thing we're going to look at here is the beds themselves. The beds have a rest effectiveness that determines how quickly people recover their rest. However, never ever make a bed out of stone. Make it out of any other material. Plasteel, steel, gold, jade, anything but stone, and you'll be fine. So these beds and these pawns all the way along here all correspond. So for example, this normal bed here has a rest effectiveness of 100%, and the pawn normal in it is going to, well, we're going to find out how much of a bonus they get for sleeping in it. Over here, this is a legendary bed. It's giving a rest effectiveness bonus of 160%. All of these pawns went to bed at midnight, and we've installed a little mod to put in minutes as well on the day so we can see exactly how long they're asleep for and how long it takes them to recover from 30% effectiveness all the way to 100%. Down here we've got a few extra bonus things we've added in. The first is someone with a bionic heart. It turns out when it comes to resting, blood pumping plays a role in this. This is supposed to increase rest effectiveness by about 8% if you have that bonus to blood pumping. Also, we've got a bionic stomach because it turns out metabolism also plays a role. Now, all of the bionic stomachs, all the stomachs are the same, so nuclear stomach, reprocessor stomach, all of them give a metabolism bonus, so we're not going to really care which one it is. The circadian assistant is going to be a little bit different. The circadian assistant here is, it reduces rest fall rate. This will not affect how quickly they regain their rest when they're in a bed, but it will mean when they're out of bed, their rest should decrease slower. We'll be testing that more of the long-term thing. Luciferium over here is, well, that increases your metabolism and your blood pumping and your breathing. All of three of these affect sleep, so I'm really curious to see how long they need to stay in bed for. Oh wow, the unblinking is already up and about. The unblinking over here is, well, actually, let's do one more thing. This here is Quick Sleeper. This is a trait you can get that gives you a rest multiplier. I'm really curious to see how well that works out as well. Now, all of these beds down here are excellent. So we put them all in excellent beds, and we're going to use excellent as sort of the 0 point for this experiment, namely because excellent is something you can achieve, excellent beds are something you can achieve quite handily. Now, over here we have a Royal Legendary bed. Now, these give a rest effectiveness bonus of 168, which is 8% better than just a normal bed. However, they're incredibly expensive, and this is just ludicrously over the top testing at this point, because this person here also has the Quick Sleeper trait. They also have Luciferium, a Circadian Assistant, a Bionic Stomach, and a Bionic Heart. They've basically got everything stacked on top of each other to see how much we can reduce their sleep requirements. And right now, it turns out they need 2 hours and 21 minutes to fill up their sleep meter from 30% to 100%. Which, yeah, that's kind of crazy. And where are you going? Cleaning trash. All right, let's speed up time here and see how long it takes for all of them to get out of bed and start wandering around, and then we can just have a quick go through how much each one of these is worth. Having a quick look at the numbers and bearing in mind that we're using excellent here as a baseline because of it's relatively easy to get your hands on one, we can see that having an awful or poor bed gives you a massive bonus. It's a minus 24 and minus 32% to how much productivity you can get out of a pawn in a day. Well, not quite, but we'll come back to that. Masterwork is actually not that much better than excellent. I mean, a 7.5% gain is nothing to sneeze at. It's just I was really expecting it to be more. And the legendary is just, okay, yes, you gain 28% more. That's kind of incredible. Okay, then we get down to down here, and these ones. Now, bear in mind, all of these are using an excellent bed, so the quick sleeper comes out ahead. In fact, a quick sleeper in an excellent bed is better than just a normal sleeper in a legendary bed. That's how good the quick sleeper trait is. Kind of surprised. Next up comes Luciferium. Not actually a big surprise there. That stuff is amazing. Not quite as good as a quick sleeper, but it's actually better than a masterwork bed. So Luciferium, it just, every time I tested that, it just turns out to be amazing. All right, then we've got your Circadian Assistant. That has no change, of course, but further testing to come. And then you've got your Bionic Stomach and your Bionic Heart. However, there are some complications to all these testing, and that numbers are not the be-all, end-all. The problem is to do with how long the pawns stay in bed. For example, this pawn didn't rise until about 8:30 in the morning. That meant they were awake for less time, and their rest has not decreased as much. So they're at 39% rest. As opposed to, say, this legendary over here, they've been awake an awful lot longer, and as such, their rest has decreased down to 25%. They've been up so long. In fact, they tried to go to bed already. We had to stop them. Also, the quick sleeper tried to go to bed, and one other that I can't remember off the top of my head, but whatever. So that means you've got to be really careful. If you this legendary one is going to basically end up out of sync with everyone else because they're going to be going to bed a little bit earlier every night, and at some point they'll just be getting up in the middle of the night type of thing. So what we want to do is see how far you can stretch it before you start to get people falling out of sync. Also, we want to see just how effective this thing really is. For example, we look at the quick sleeper here. This trait seems to be incredibly powerful and all that, and they get a massive bonus. However, if you look at their current needs right now, they're at 24% rest. Everyone in the original test was at 30%. However, this pawn is already at 24% because they slept so fast, they got up a lot sooner, and now they're down to here. As opposed to, say, this awful pawn, which is at 39%. So this pawn is actually going to be up earlier now, because they'll have more rest in the bank. That means they won't need as much time in bed, which means they'll get up sooner. So I don't think the numbers are the numbers are going to be a little bit skewed on the first testing. We are going to see exactly how much of a bonus it's actually worth on both ends on an actual real playthrough. After a few days of testing, we've got them all lined up and ready to get to sleep on their midnight sojourn. Now, one thing to note about this, because there's a few things we've discovered. One, quick sleepers will immediately try and get back into their excellent beds before they even need to. They try to go to bed about 11 o'clock. So they're going to be off kilter by about an hour. This is actually kind of awkward. At the same time, legendary, they're off kilter by about 30 minutes. Maybe that's not the best thing to have them having that much sleep or being that good at it. The unblinking over here is an absolutely amazing story because they don't get a bedroom bonus. They don't actually sleep long enough for the bedroom bonus to kick in. They don't so much sleep as power nap. They just power nap for about 2 hours, 18 minutes, and then they're up and about for a full day. And the great thing about them is they don't come back. It's because of the circadian assistant they've got installed. This circadian assistant reduces the rest fall rate, which means it doesn't fall down as fast, which means they don't need to go to bed as quickly. In fact, the circadian assistant comes out quite high up on the list, just below legendary bed. So having an excellent bed and a circadian assistant means you're almost as good as a legendary bed. However, you are vulnerable to EMP, so it's not all perfect. Anyway, let's just fast forward this along and then go over the numbers. Before we go too deep into the numbers, let's just have a look at scheduling here. When it comes to sleep, if you've assigned a pawn a sleeping block, they will attempt to go to bed and fall asleep. And once their head hits the pillow, they won't get back up again until their rest meter is full. So this whole thing here is, we set it up for 5 hours, but honestly, we could chop all of that off, set that to anything there, and it wouldn't make a difference. So long as they get to bed before 4 o'clock, they'll be fine. They'll stay in bed until their rest meter is charged. In real life scenarios, you're going to have issues where pawns will have be someone to sleep, but some of them will be on the opposite side of the base over here. It will take them a long time to get back into their bedrooms, meaning they'll be an hour or two late going to bed. So this was done where we teleported them all right beside their beds to make sure we got a perfectly accurate amount of sleep on average that they're going to get. Another note is you do have access to another type of furniture, and that is sleeping spots and bedrolls. Bedrolls are actually, oh, never mind, we don't have the resources. Bedrolls are about 5% worse than beds on average. And sleeping spots, just don't use them unless you absolutely have to, because their rest effectiveness is 80% and they don't have quality levels, they suck. For example, an awful bed here is a rest effectiveness of 86. I think the obvious lesson we learned here is the unblinking is just insane because of how little sleep they need. 2 hours and 18 minutes a day, and that is plenty of sleep for them. And due to the circadian assistant they have installed, they don't need to come back to bed at any point, or they don't start to go to sleep early. They go to sleep when you schedule them to, and they just work all day long. It's absolutely monstrous. Of course, it's completely untenable, and you wouldn't be able to do that to all your pawns, but it is interesting to know that it is possible to get sleep requirements that low. Next up comes the quick sleeper. At 4 hours 37 minutes, with just a normal excellent bed made out of wood, that's kind of insane. That's in fact too powerful. The problem with it is they're awake for so long that the rest meter declines past this point here, that point where they start getting negatives from it, before it comes around to their bedtime again, meaning they end up having to go to sleep earlier than normal, and you're going to end up with them going to sleep earlier than they ought to all the time. It's just going to mess with you. At the same time, legendary beds do the exact same thing. They're not quite as good as the quick sleeper, coming in at 5 hours of rest per night, but it does mean that they're going to start falling out of sync with everyone else. It's not the worst thing in the world, it's just something you're going to need to be aware of. In fact, the circadian assistant is one thing I would probably install on quick sleepers or anyone using a legendary bed, because it would get rid of that problem entirely and improve their sleep even more. Now, of course, after the quick sleeper and legendary comes the circadian assistant, and wow, this one was a bit of a dark horse. I did not expect it to be this good. Circadian assistant comes out at 5.5 hours sleep a night. Well, 5 hours 29 minutes of sleep required. That's great. That beats out a masterwork bed. It beats out Luciferium. I mean, it's not even that far behind. Okay, you're half an hour behind a legendary bed, but that is kind of incredible for a single implant. Now, one thing that is a problem with these is it does leave you vulnerable to EMP. This means if your pawn gets EMP'd, they will be knocked unconscious. This can be a problem, especially if you're facing enemies with EMP, like the Empire or Zeus hammers can also be a problem, or if you use a lot of EMPs to stun mechanoids so you can melee them down. So maybe don't install Circadian Assistance on all of your pawns unless you know you're going to be avoiding EMPs in the near and foreseeable future. After the Circadian Assistant though comes Luciferium, and no surprises there, it's actually pretty good. It's 5 hours 53 minutes as opposed to the Excellence 6 hours 28 minutes, so you're shaving yourself off about 40 minutes on your sleep time. It's not really amazing. I mean, after Luciferium, things kind of just get bleh, I suppose, or meh. I mean, Masterwork beds come behind that at 6 hours and 4 minutes, but at that point you're gaining, what, 24 minutes in a day? It's just the difference between an Excellent and a Masterwork bed is, well, a lot smaller than I thought it was, unfortunately. Bionic Heart comes next, then comes Bionic Stomach, and both of them are okay, but honestly, if you're installing them for the sleep bonus, you're really just going for an unblinking pawn. That's all you're really targeting there, because the bonuses are so small. Avoid normal, poor, and awful beds if you can, I suppose, is the main takeaway. Poor and awful beds just really do eat into your time. Remember the way I praised the Circadian Assistant? Well, in comparison to an excellent bed, it really is quite good. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, that means a poor bed is sort of the other end of it, where it takes you spend an extra hour in bed because of it. Though when we did this second round of testing, I did notice that how bad these beds were did drop, because they do spend a little bit more time in bed, so they're up a little bit later and their whole rest effectiveness thing evens out a little bit. But they're still terrible. Get away from poor and awful beds as fast as you can. Normal or better for the win. My closing conclusions on this would be, yes, Circadian Assistants, far more powerful than I've ever given them credit for. If you're not worried about EMPs, install them on every pawn you get your hands on if you possibly can. Though the first people I'd probably give them to would be any quick sleepers and anyone who's got a legendary bed, namely because otherwise they're going to have problems with getting to bed on time or staying awake long enough to make it around to the next bedtime. Barring that, the standard thing of the better the bed, the better. Anyway, I'm going to cut this out here. I hope you enjoyed it. Good luck.